Morning, James. Oh, here we go. Terrific. Yeah, good morning. We've got with us today David Reid, Policy and Technical Manager from the Nursery and Garden Industry Victoria. And David, we're going to just have a bit of a conversation about the horticulture industry and pick your brains and look at various different areas of pathways into the industry and what it represents. So, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, David, tell us a little bit about the broad area of the horticulture industry. I know it's like how big's a a ball of string. So
sure. Well, yeah. Look, so I'll start with myself. So I work for the Nursery and Garden Industry Victoria. We're a peak body for horticulture in Victoria, and by that I mean that we support horticulturalists across the state. So we're member based, so they'll pay a fee to, I guess, get the benefit of some of our services we provide, which include sort of networking opportunities, professional development, advocacy, things like that. So Victorian horticulture, so Victoria it's kind of widely recognised that we are the home of horticulture. It is the best place in Australia if you want to get into the horticultural industry. And that's because of just the variety of opportunities that we have here, and also the strength of the industry and the networks that currently exist here. So in Victoria, prior to COVID, we're sort of $1.6 billion industry. That's post-COVID, it's probably increased significantly. We employ, conservatively about 11,000 people across the state. But that is quite focused on nurseries and retailers, rather than the broader scope of what we do represent. So, as I said, we represent horticulture and horticulturalists, and that can be in many forms across Victoria. You would probably, you've all been to a Bunnings before. You've seen the green life in Bunnings. That could be sometimes people's first sort of encounter with us, but there's the independent retailers as well. The other big box stores. I think we're even selling plants in Safeway and Coles now. So look, plenty of opportunity to sort of interact on that retail side, but it's those businesses that supply those nurseries. Those retail nurseries, and the diversity of product that those growers grow to supply those retail nurseries is huge. I mean, I think they grow about 30 or 40,000 different species in Victoria. I mean, there's 400,000 different species of plants out there. So we're just a tip of the iceberg of what the possibilities are. But yeah, it's those nurseries that supply the retailers. It's the turf growers, so the people that supply the grass to stadiums, golf courses, etc. And that's when you can start sort of stretching out into the people that support those businesses. So the people that create the growing media, which are in the pots, which the plant goes in. It's the people that create the environments. So the actual infrastructure, the buildings that the plants are grown in. It's it's irrigation specialists. It's the people that create. It's people that grow beneficial bugs that the growers spread out amongst their nursery to tackle all the nasty bugs. It's fertilizers, it's chemical companies, so it's incredibly diverse. And I did mention that we grow about 30,000 different species, 40,000 different species of plants in Victoria. And those growers who are growing those are all growing for different purposes as well. So it even gets further fragmented in that there's people that are growing for the retail sort of component, just for average Joe public to go out and buy a plant or a tree to put in their front and backyard. But it's also, sorry, stop me if you've got any questions, because I will just prattle on.
Keep going. That's great. We will talk about sort of the career pathways and directions in a bit, but we'll let you set the background first, if that's great. Right. Thank you.
So it's those businesses that supply, as I said, the trees and shrubs and what have you for the retail sector. But it's also, you go to Coles and you see like the fruit and veg section. I mean, that's obviously not grown out the back, and it's grown in orchards and through market gardeners and what have you. We actually start all of those commodity groups as well. So we start the citrus industry, we start the grapevine, the nut crop, apple and pears, stone fruit. We start all of those, and we start all of those either from a bit of budwood cutting, a little young plant, and that gets sold to the orchard. So we start that. We're stretching into medicinal cannabis, which is a growing industry in Victoria as well. But then there's, I could just keep on going with various sort of different sectors that we are involved in. Actually, James, you mentioned one earlier before, which is, the growing interest in regenerative practices. I mean, we've got the nurseries that grow at scale, tube stock that is planted out to, bring landscapes back from the brink.
What, James, David, the topical, like the cannabis side of things, are there other sort of, I guess, the sustainability thing? What currently right now as we sit, what are the hot sort of topical areas of the horticulture industry?
Sure. So we've obviously got hot topics within the industry, but also outside the industry. So within the industry, it's about, for us, it's sustainability. So the majority of growers already, recapture most of their water, and water is a very interesting and challenging topic, depending on the times of the year and various variables, climatic variables that are, I guess, making that more of a challenge. So yeah, most of the growers, they do capture their own water and they reuse that water and they treat that water before it gets put onto the plants again. So they're quite sustainable in that aspect. One of the challenges that we've had for a long time is the containers, the pots that the plants go in, which is polypropylene. That is something that can be recycled. The problem that we've had for a long time is that it can't actually go into, your roadside collections. And that's frankly because of the color of the pot, because it's black, it's not picked up in at those transfer stations. So the industry is actually, and various businesses within the industry, I mean, we have one of the largest plastics manufacturers in the country as a member of ours supporting the industry, devising different pot sizes and shapes for different purposes. They really need that plastic back so they can recycle it again. And they're working at the moment to really close that loop, and they've embarked on quite a big project where there'll be actually bins at retail stores and things where people can actually go and return that plastic pot. Even in nurseries that go through a lot of plastic pots, they're going to start putting those bins in there. The goal is to increase the amount of plastic that's reused again. So they're probably some of the little things that are within the industry that are a challenge. There's also outside the industry, and then there's a topic that sort of covers both, and that is climate change. Obviously, is a shared problem that everybody is experiencing and will experience going forward. On the industry side of things, it's, well, what plants are we growing now that are going to be that are going to have a long life cycle compared to the environment's growing now versus the climate that it's going to be in the future. So it's higher temps, lower water availability. So we need to make sure that we're growing plants that are going to be suitable for that time. So The industry does a lot of R&D around that, and so there was some work done with the City of Melbourne not long ago, looking at all of the tree species they currently have. So City of Melbourne did some independent work, and then they also did some work which we provided some input on as well. City of Melbourne actually looked at all the trees that they currently have in their inventory in Melbourne, and looked at the amount of diversity they have. Obviously, the greater diversity that we have, the better and more resilient those species are to various pressures. Then they looked at, hey, what trees are going to be suitable for the industry to grow over the next however many years, into the future. So we sort of identified those species which are going to be more useful going forward. And we're constantly looking at bringing new genetics into the country to make sure that, that product is available. And that's obviously something that the average, person in the public. Yeah, sorry.
You mentioned cannabis.
Oh yeah.
Before, we all get a little bit, I don't know about cannabis, but the potential for the industry. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Just
Sure. Yeah, well, so we have a couple of growers that are involved in that in Victoria, and there's still sort of many more that are coming online. Look, it's I believe there's been a lot of Canadian investment in Victoria, a lot of overseas money that's come in to set up some facilities for medicinal cannabis. So I think there's a big facility up in Mildura, and there's facilities going in the southeast of Melbourne. And look, that is going to be a growth area.
And I guess from previous conversations with other people, the fact that they're looking to maybe use it in soft drinks and stuff like that instead of like the caffeine element to it. Can you tell us much about it, or?
Well, that sounds more recreational, and recreational isn't on the cards at the moment. And so it is medicinal. So that would be prescribed by health professionals.
Yep.
So look, that's just one small kind of component within horticulture that is involved in
Cool.
medicines. I mean, there's plenty of others where derivatives have pulled out of particular plants that are grown and used in other.
Could we now turn to sort of like have a career type focus and talk about some pathways into the industry?
Sure.
Just if you're a young person that was keen to be involved, what are the steps? Where to first?
Sure. So, look, within horticulture, there is a job for everybody, and as I've sort of said, it is incredibly broad. So, an interest is a good start. But look, if you're looking for work and you're still at high school, contact a local nursery. Ask if they've got any jobs going over the holiday period while there's downtime from school, and you don't necessarily need to come in with a lot of training behind you. There'll be plenty of on-the-job training available. There's various sort of subjects and units you can do at school in horticulture, which is well worthwhile looking into, and you can speak to your careers or your guidance practitioners about that. Then there's also the various certificates out of TAFE for once you've sort of finished school. So currently the Cert 3 in horticulture, and I believe the Cert 2 as well is on the free TAFE list at the moment, which is a really great opportunity. In the north, I guess the nearest RTO would be Melbourne Poly that's teaching that. And then, there's other sort of educational opportunities post that, like a level 7, like a degree course that involve horticulture in some way at sort of Melbourne University or MIT. With regards to pathways, it's feel free to contact the association if you've got an interest in it. More than happy to sort of put people on the right path. Speak to your guidance practitioners, and they're welcome to give me a call as well.
And there's also we've got a nice document too that outlines possible jobs and that as well too that we've got on our website. I think,
Yeah,
at this
that's
particular
great.
moment. We could
Yeah,
update, which would be terrific. Well, could you tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into the industry, and like where you started and where you are now?
sure.
And can I just add to that, Dave, as well? I'd like to know a bit about how you describe your kind of life connection to the environment and sort of where that comes from, because I think in the industry that's really important, right? You kind of pay, as you said earlier, you pay attention to the world around you, and the environment's an important thing. So if you could speak a bit to that.
Sure. So just on that point, I mean, I sort of feel as though, so many of us, even me, prior to really getting, neck deep in horticulture and plants, you're very passive with the way you interact with the environment. Once you start to understand how plants work, and you start to recognize plants and, the various uses of them as well, you start to respect them and respect the environment a little bit further. I would dare say that, I don't know how the industry would feel about this, but, in some way, shape or form, that they're environmentalists in that that they're doing a job which is actually contributing to the environment. They can definitely go to sleep well at night knowing that they're doing something positive. But you're right. It's there's a lot going on in the world out there, and I think a greater knowledge of plants and the benefits they do provide, which, again, I could bang on about the benefits of plants, but there is a time limit, I'm sure. The world would be a little better off if we actually stopped a little bit. And look, I always think that there's something special about somebody that is willing to devote time, putting their energy into something that doesn't just appear, like that. They've got to wait. They've got to water it. They've got to nurture it. They've got to, make sure it's getting everything that it needs for it to be, obviously a saleable commodity at the end of the day, but going to do something positive out there. There's something special about a horticulturalist, and they're very easy people to get along with. It's very much
it's really cool. It's great to think about that, particularly when you're growing up and you're trying to find a pathway and you have a bit of a moral purpose as to why you want to do something. I think this industry is something that's really important in the context, as you said, climate change and those big issues. So, if you have that, it makes it a lot easier to get to work in the morning and to hold on to your studies and to keep pursuing that pathway. So,
And, an amazing thing about, once you sort of, you peek behind the curtain of plants and how they work, and you just never stop learning. There's just so much to learn. We're always learning. There are some people out there in the industry that are just experts, but even I would say they're still learning. And that was one of the things that attracted me to this industry. So I dabbled a bit in quite a few areas of, career life, and, even studying a number of different, various options which would lead into different careers. I settled upon horticulture. I didn't know horticulture existed for a long time. I didn't know that there was you could go to school and learn about plants, just because there wasn't, I guess, somebody like myself out there, telling people about that and the opportunities. So I studied psychology. I studied applied chemistry. I even studied anatomy for a while, and it was, but they were very science focused. So I went to various universities, and it was, I'd always enjoyed plants. I've always loved growing plants. And it was only after sort of actually being in a university that I sort of realized what the opportunities were. I'm like, there's plant science. That looks interesting. So I did that. And then I started working for the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne here for a few years as a ranger. And then I went off to government, state government, and I I worked with in the biosecurity section of government, so that's looking after pests and diseases that affect plants and the various industries that grow them. Then I started working for the association just because I sort of saw some really great opportunities to do things like this, for example. Yeah.
It's great. And in terms of opportunities, just one more question. You kind of spoke to food systems before and, propagating for supermarkets as well as nurseries. And if people are listening, they're living in the inner north and they're thinking about, wanting to, after study and school, going to other parts of Victoria and other parts of Australia, what kind of opportunities do you see for moving to regional areas in that sort of area? Because it's my understanding is that there's kind of very different spaces there in terms of hort.
So as I said, sort of Victoria is the home of horticulture in Australia. And if I want to sort of get down to more of a granular level, it's like up in the Dandenongs, stretching all the way down to the Mornington Peninsula. So, a third of all plants that are produced in the country come out of Victoria. But saying that, I mean, post-COVID, like, let's go global. I mean, you get some skills in horticulture, you become a really good grower. There's no stopping you going across the world. They're transferable skills. You're just moving into a different climate. And even then, some of those climates are controlled or exactly the same as they are in Victoria. There's opportunity to go anywhere in the world to practice horticulture. I mean, there's people from overseas coming into Victoria to practice horticulture because they're great growers. Good growers, passionate people, good workers will always be recognised and they'll be well sought after. But saying that, I mean, we've got, up on the Murray, there's some big sort of nut crop and citrus nurseries. Out in Portland, I mentioned before, there's big rose nurseries. Yep. Let's go out the other way. You've got some regenerative sort of, nurseries growing, tube stock for those landscapes. The diversity is huge. I reckon if you go into every regional centre, there will be opportunities, guaranteed.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, David.
My pleasure.
And we really would like to say it's fantastic to have you on board. And look, the potential for young people is just massive. So this is a slow burn situation, as we've spoken about, but if anybody needs to get in contact, they can contact Nursery and Garden Industry Victoria, website ngiv.com.au. And David, looking forward to catching up with you soon. Thanks to James Goring from Inland, and we'll catch up with you soon, mate. Great. Thanks again. Cheers.
Bye. Thanks, David.
Catch you later.
Stay on board for a